When it comes to the question of ecology, we have to be honest with the fact that in many ways, the Church is facing a set of questions that she's not had to address in her earlier history. The very word ecology only came into popular use at the end of the 19th century. But while the challenges may be new, the sources of the solution are ever ancient and are rooted in the core convictions of our faith. In the very first lines of our creed, we profess a belief in God, the Father, the Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. This means that when we walk out into a starry night, we're not walking out into a meaningless abyss, a vast void of cold indifference. Instead, we walk out into a universe that's been willed into being by a God who supremely loves us. No Catholic can be indifferent to the concerns of ecology then, because we're not indifferent to the God who's brought all of this splendid universe into being. We also profess the Son, the second person of the Trinity, the one through whom all things were made, the Logos, the Word, the wisdom of God, the rationale behind the grand scope of it all. You see, when God creates, He doesn't just bring a world of chaos into being. He brings an ordered, brilliant, delicate, fragile universe of such density and complexity, so thick with light and meaning, that we never fully exhaust its true riches and beauty. It's very popular to imagine the search for wisdom or the search for truth as a person holding a candle surrounded by darkness and shadow. There they go into this corner of the universe or that corner of the universe as they learn about the world. But I think it's important to remember that for St. Thomas Aquinas, the situation is exactly the opposite. Things are thick with meaning, flush with intelligibility, brimming with light, and I'm the one that's caught in darkness. Thomas says the human intellect is so weak that it cannot penetrate the essence of a single fly. And so the world that you and I occupy is like a divine jeweler's shop, a display of the finest artistry the mind has ever known. We should probably say something about original sin because this Catholic doctrine is also critical in getting a proper understanding of our responsibility to God and each other in terms of ecology. For St. Thomas, original sin directly impacts only the intellectual creatures and most especially the rational soul of the human person. What's important to keep in mind is that for him, the lower orders of creation, the plants and the animal realms, are immune from its devastating effects. I'm afraid this is a claim that's getting increasingly lost in Catholic imaginations. But what this means is that the divine wisdom continues to speak through created things, that despite the ravages of original sin, the wisdom that written into the structure of the cosmos endures. There's a wisdom written into the structure of our own bodies, and deference to this is the only prudent measure to take. Doesn't it follow that if it's we who are darkened by sin, but creatures are not, a certain deference to their intelligibility would be the only prudent measure to take? Doesn't it follow that before we propose to modify nature to suit our expectations, it'd be wise to consider how our own ways of acting may need modification? Suppose a man for his 60th birthday purchases a tract of old-growth forest and burns it down. He likes fires and thinks that a big fire is entertaining. I think most of us would agree that this is a kind of intemperance, a kind of gluttony, because it lacks a proportionate good. It's not that we can never take down a tree or use a creature, but it does mean that when we use them, they should be used for a proportionate good. And this seems to fail the test. When our use of creation involves the manipulation of its very structures and natural purposes, as in the case of transgenetic modification of creatures, such an enterprise ought not to be undertaken except in deference to the order and wisdom of creation of which the creature is a part, with utmost care and prudent circumspection, when proportionate goods are clearly identified and reasonably expected, and all other reasonable alternatives have been considered, including the modification of one's lifestyle. Pope Francis speaks of the need to develop an integral ecology, and once again we can turn to St. Thomas as a mentor and guide. Of course, he never uses the phrase, but he does talk about the natural law and defines it as the rational creature's participation in the eternal law. Frankly, I can't think of a better definition of integral ecology than the reasonable participation in this divinely ordered cosmos. So we can turn to St. Thomas and the tradition he inspired to develop those virtues that help us live the natural law or integral ecology. Temperance asks us to review our habits of consumption and be mindful of our inclinations to overconsume, to eat a little bit lower on the food chain and live a much simpler lifestyle. The virtue of justice asks us to consider what is owed our neighbors, not just the ones we can see, but the future generations. How many of us have enjoyed the beauty and splendor of our national parks? We owe it to them to give them the same opportunities. The virtue of fortitude calls us to be people of hope in the face of difficult challenges. We have to resist the tone of doom and gloom that so often dominates ecological discourse. And finally, prudence, one of the most important virtues in matters of ecology, because its characteristic is a flexible application to what is right and true in this particular circumstance. We want to be careful of too quickly applying a single policy to address all the complex situations. We can have faith that God's got this, that He's got us, and if we live our faith in His Son, we will find a way forward. The next time you behold the starry heavens or see a beautiful sunset, whenever you're caught up by the beauty and the spontaneous gift of this extraordinary universe, you can see it as an invitation from the Logos, the one through whom all things were made. This one took flesh in the person of Jesus Christ, and through His cross and resurrection, He invites us to enter into a divine friendship. It's the reason that true integral ecology always points to Christ, to see beyond the roof of the stars and contemplate the face of the one through whom all good things come.
In the next episode, we'll see how political life can't be reduced to a simple list of rights and duties. If this is the first episode you've watched, we recommend you watch the introductory episode of this series next.